On the morning of December 4, 2024, in Midtown Manhattan, a masked male snuck up behind a CEO of United Healthcare, a health insurance company, and pumped 3 bullets into the executive's back and leg. 50-year-old Brian Thompson was pronounced dead a few minutes later. When I first saw the news, my mind immediately went to a 2009 social horror movie. And no, I'm not talking about Jennifer's Body. The sixth movie in the flawless Saw franchise is one of the most beloved ones. Not because it's a perfect movie, it sure isn't, but because it was the first time in the franchise where Jigsaw threatened an enemy people could get behind. An enemy Brian Thompson represented. So we start off the way any Saw movie does, with a cold open. We have 2 people, Eddie, a heavy loan shark, and Simone, a smaller loan shark, who wake up with devices strapped to their heads. Jigsaw's tape tells them their devices are, quote, symbolic of the shackles you place upon others, since they preyed on desperate people with predatory loans. To survive, they must literally cut off their own flesh and put it on a scale. Whoever gives the greatest weight of flesh within 60 seconds lives. Eddie, being a big boy, tries to cut chunks off his stomach. Simone, realizing she has a six-pack, takes a drastic shortcut and hacks off her arm with a cleaver after trying to cut it off with a knife for 59 seconds. Damn it, Simone. Simone survives. Eddie dies. This trap is about profit-driven cruelty. These 2 weren't in healthcare, but the predatory loan angle foreshadows the same idea, exploiting vulnerable people until their pound of flesh is taken. After dealing with the cold open and some Saw 5 shenanigans, we're taken to the Umbrella Health offices, where we see a bunch of people working hard to deny coverage to folks like you. They're led by a William Easton, the company's senior vice president. The name Umbrella Health, I don't think I gotta explain, it's almost too on the nose. It sounds like a symbol of protection. We're covering you. You're safe under our umbrella, but that's the irony. It's an umbrella that doesn't actually keep you dry. It's coverage that only looks like protection. The name itself is a corporate mask, all warmth and reassurance on the outside, while behind it, there's a system built on exclusion. And of course, umbrella also evokes something wide and impersonal, a massive structure under which individuals are reduced to data points. It's the perfect metaphor for bureaucratic dehumanization. Everyone's covered, but no one's seen. There's also a nice layer of horror intertext, because some people say Umbrella immediately recalls Resident Evil's Umbrella Corporation, another company that literally monetized human suffering. So back to William. William isn't a bit of a problem. He's being sued for denying coverage to a dying man, Harold Abbott, with heart failure. He claims the man was denied for not informing a pre-existing condition. Harold got an oral surgery to remove a cyst from his jaw 30 years ago, and William jumps through a trillion hoops to say that could have caused Harold's heart disease. Harold paid his premiums for 10 years without ever using it, and it was still denied coverage. William then goes on to say that people see them as the bad guys, but no one sees the millions of people they help or the millions of dollars they donate to charity, as if that makes up for the lives they quite literally take. William's lawyer, Debbie, asks who found the error in the man's application, and he says the dog pit. The dog pit is his 6-person claims unit at the health insurance company. The team trained to dig through applications and medical histories to find technicalities like pre-existing conditions, omissions, fine print violations, so they can deny coverage. That might sound like just horror movie cruelty, but it isn't. According to a comprehensive study from the Commonwealth Fund, the US has the worst performing health system out of all high-income countries, worse than Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. And the problems start where they always do. Insurance. In every other wealthy country, everyone's covered, full stop. But in the US, coverage itself is treated like a luxury, one that can vanish the moment you lose your job, move states, or get sick in the wrong way. And even when you do have insurance, it's often so hollow, with deductibles and copays so high that it barely functions. Then there's a lack of primary care, which means a lot of people only see a doctor when they're already in crisis. By then, it's too late and too expensive. So what happens? People go online to beg for survival. Literally. More than 20 million Americans have started a GoFundMe to pay for medical costs. 1 in 5 adults have donated to one, but only about 12% of those campaigns ever reach their goal. We all know what happens to the rest. Debt, if they're lucky, death, if they're not. Still, somehow we're trained to see these tragedies as personal failures, not symptoms of a broken system. Because, as writer Philip Roth once said, America's reactionaries have spent decades tearing apart anything that could make people feel part of a community. It's easier to keep people working, shopping, and pliable when they think of themselves only as themselves. That's the world Saw 6 was already worrying about back in 2009. A system so brutal it can make vengeance look like justice. So back to the movie. William is still still in his office watching a news report about new Jigsaw games emerging despite Jigsaw's death. For those of you new to Saw, love you to death, Jigsaw dies in the third one, but Tobin Bell shows up in nearly all of them, so Jigsaw's presence is always felt, and I love it. All of a sudden, the lights go out, he sees a shadow, he shoots the shadow, who happens to be the security guard, and then he gets kidnapped by the famous pig. William wakes up locked in a sealed room with the company's janitor, Hank, who suffers from a smoking-related illness. Both men are strapped into a harness that crushes a chest cavity a little more each time they breathe. Whoever breathes more will suffocate/crush faster. The one who breathes less wins and survives. Also, Jigsaw says there are 4 straps around William's limbs, representing 4 tests he must complete. If he doesn't, they'll detonate, and it doesn't look pretty. Then we cut to a woman and a teenage boy, Tara and Brent, waking up in a caged room, and they realize they're there because of the boy's father. The camera then cuts to a TV showing William, and we gotta put 1 plus 1 together. A reporter named Pamela Jenkins wakes up in another caged room. She has sensationalized Jigsaw's life for a good chunk of her career. In both rooms, there's a tank filled with acid, with a lever that says live and die on Tara and Brent's side. Back to William and Hank. The trap they're in is called the Oxygen Crusher, and it's one of the most direct moral indictments in the entire franchise. On paper, it looks like a simple endurance game. 2 people breathing against each other, and whoever takes fewer breaths lives. But the tape gives it away immediately. This isn't a test of lungs, it's a test of ideology. Jigsaw starts by telling William, quote, "Your health and hereditary background put you in the highest category of success." Basically, he's calling out how William's entire insurance formula rewards people who look good on paper, the ones who are low risk, the ones who fit neatly into his statistics. Then he describes Hank, the janitor, as someone who has, quote, "continued to smoke despite medical advice," framing him as morally responsible for his illness. It's classic victim-blaming logic. Hank's not just sick, he's guilty of being sick. And then comes the line that defines the whole movie. When faced with death, who should live and who will live are 2 entirely separate things. That's the core argument. The health insurance system and William's policy model decide who should live based on numbers, habits, and cost. Jigsaw's test forces him to confront the messier truth that human life isn't a probability formula. Mechanically, the trap's brutal simplicity drives that home. Every breath tightens the clamp around their chests. Whoever breathes less survives. William, who's healthy and privileged, is now forced to hear every panicked gasp of the men he'd previously dismissed as a statistic. The game punishes not just physically but morally. Jigsaw saying, "You judged this man, now listen to the sound of his suffering." Hank doesn't win. That's deliberate. William survives, proving that his formula worked within the sadistic logic of the trap. But in doing so, he literally kills someone, becoming the living embodiment of his own policies. That's what makes this sequence so viciously ironic. The system functions exactly as designed, and someone still dies. William removes the first strap from his arm and notices a tattoo that says "The Party," and we get ourselves a ticket to Flashback City. So William and John, for those of you new to Saw, love you to death, John means John Kramer, also known as Jigsaw, the mastermind behind the games, with the help of his apprentices. William and John meet each other at a party Joe throws at the clinic, Joe being John's wife. William says him and John are in similar businesses, meaning John tries to predict people's behavior and so does William, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because John is an engineer/architect, so I don't really know where William got that from, but alright. He says that when a person comes to the company for coverage, the company has to analyze each person for the probability of success, and the way they do that is through the formula, which in essence breaks it down to someone's monthly payment multiplied by lifespan minus the probability of illness. If the sum is positive, they consider coverage. John asks who devised the formula, and William says, "Me," to which John says, "So you decide who lives and who dies?" And William says, "No, I decide which people have the potential to live long, healthy lives." And John says he's not taking into consideration the most important human element of all, which is the will to live. He says that shit in every single movie. And John concludes by saying that until a person is faced with death, it's impossible to tell whether they have what it takes to survive. Then we come back to real time, and William moves on to the next trap. The next trap, the gallows trap, is probably the first time Saw 6 drops the metaphor and just lets William play God in the most literal way possible. It's simple, almost too simple, and that's what makes it so cruel. Two of William's employees, Addie and Alan, are standing on tiny retractable platforms. They've got barbed wire nooses around their necks, and their hands are tied behind their backs. In front of William are two handles, one for each of them. As long as he keeps holding both, they stay alive. But the second he lets go of one handle, the floor drops and that person hangs. There's no workaround, no clever loophole. He can't save them both. He has to let one die. And what Jigsaw's doing here is obvious. He's making William enact his own insurance formula in real time, but with people he actually knows. On paper, Alan, the younger, healthier guy, is the right choice. Addie, the older secretary with a family history of diabetes, is the kind of person William's system would deny coverage to. That's what his formula is built to do: turn flesh and blood people into actuarial data, where one checkmark means lives and another means dies. But here, Jigsaw makes that formula visible. It's no longer a spreadsheet, it's a woman's neck. Addie isn't just a statistic, she's someone William has probably wished good morning to every day for years. And that's when the system stops feeling objective. It stops feeling like math because the human cost has a sound, a face, and a scream attached to it. Alan has no living family. No one will notice he's gone or mourn his loss. That's something that wouldn't even register if William were analyzing him purely through his insurance formula. What would matter then is his health and how much the company could profit from it. But that's not what William sees when the situation is presented this way. What he sees is Addie, a mother, a wife, a woman with a loving family who would be devastated if she were gone. He sees the human, not the formula. That's why he chooses her. Alan hangs, and when it's over, the meaning lands hard. The system only functions by killing someone. Every decision in his line of work is, at its core, a smaller version of this trap. The gallows is Jigsaw saying, you don't deny people treatment, you hang them. You just never had to watch it happen. William walks through another part of the building and notices the other tattoo where the second contraption was, which reads Final Decision, which for some reason I kept reading Final Destination, and I was like, oh my god, it's a reference. And then I rewatched this movie to make this video, and I was like, oh my I'm so dumb. Then it's Flashback City. John meets with William to ask him to overturn the company's denial of coverage for an experimental cancer treatment. For those of you new to Saw, I love you to death, John Kramer has cancer. This is not a spoiler, it's the whole reason he created the games in the first place. He wants the company to approve this treatment, the same one he is duped on in Saw X, so he sets up a meeting with William to try and get the decision reversed. John explains the procedure, but William says the company can't cover it because, according to the company's policy, the formula, coverage is not feasible, meaning it's not a good investment for the company. And still, if John goes outside the system and seeks out this treatment, he'll lose the coverage completely. John gets up and says, quote, did you know in the Far East, people pay their doctors when they're healthy? When they're sick, they don't have to pay. So basically, they end up paying for what they want, not what they don't want. We've got it all ass backwards here. These politicians, they say the same thing over and over and over again. Healthcare decisions should be made by doctors and their patients, not by the government. Well, now I know they're not made by doctors and their patients or by the government. They're made by the fucking insurance companies. Piranha. Then William says, John, please, if you do this, you'll be on your own, and the subsequent costs to you will be staggering. To which John replies, don't talk to me about money, I have money. This is about principle. You think it's the living that will have the ultimate judgment over you, because the dead will have no claim over your soul. But you may be mistaken. By the way, that moment when John says piranha is one of the most memed moments of the franchise, and it's a line that slides by quickly but hits hard if you're paying attention. A piranha isn't evil, it's just doing what's made to do. It feeds, it strips flesh fast, it works in groups, and it leaves nothing behind. That's exactly how the insurance system operates in this film, an ecosystem of devouring. It doesn't choose to be cruel, cruelty is just built into the mechanism. John's metaphor reframes William's formula, the so-called objective life algorithm, as predation disguised as efficiency. William thinks he's a scientist. John sees a feeding frenzy. It's also a quiet reflection of how John, as Jigsaw, sees himself in contrast to that system. The piranha devours mindlessly. Jigsaw inflicts pain with intention. One destroys for profit, the other for revelation. A twist in morality, but within his logic, it's consistent. He's saying, at least I make people earn their lives. You just eat them alive. Alright, let's move on to the next trap, the steam maze. The steam maze is a trap I did not care for at all the first few times I watched this movie, but now I see it as one of those traps that perfectly shows how Saw 6 operates. It's not just torture, it's architecture. Everything in it runs like a moral machine. You can almost hear John Kramer saying, if you want to understand the system you built, you're going to live inside it. So here's how it works. Debbie, the company's lawyer, wakes up chained in this industrial maze with a chest rig set to pierce her skull in 90 seconds. The only way out is through these narrow tunnels that are blasting scalding steam. She can't get through unless William pulls the levers up on the catwalk to divert the steam. But when he does, it burns him instead. So he has to decide in real time how much pain he's willing to take to save her. And when she finally makes it to the end, she finds out the key to her survival is literally inside William's body. She can cut him open and live, or do nothing and die. It's nasty. But it's also exactly how his company works. William's entire job is making sure someone else takes the hit. Every denial letter he's ever signed is a lever. A small burn for him, a death sentence for someone else. The steam maze just makes that moral math physical. The pain doesn't disappear anymore, it has to go somewhere, and now it's on his skin. Debbie's role makes it even better, or worse depending on how you look at it. She's the legal firewall, the person who keeps the company's cruelty justified on paper. So of course she's the one crawling inside a machine, through the pipes, through the steam, getting cooked alive by the very system she spent her career defending. It's poetic in the worst way possible. She's in the belly of the beast, and the beast is her own office. And then you get to the reveal that the key's inside William's body. That's Jigsaw's entire philosophy in one image. The system William runs is built on distance, statistics, charts, risk assessments, a world where nobody actually feels what their choices do. But now the cost of saving a life is in him. If he wants to save someone, he has to bleed for it. Debbie trying to cut him open with the saw is exactly what his victims did metaphorically. They had to tear themselves apart to survive a system that refused to suffer for them. Time runs out. Debbie dies. Next up, William walks straight into the next trap, the shotgun carousel, which might be the single best trap in Saw 6. Not just because it's cool as fuck, but because it distills the entire movie's critique of bureaucratic cruelty into one horrifying machine. This is capitalism, plain and simple. One man forced to decide who lives and who dies, under the illusion that it's policy. So here's the setup. 6 of William's subordinates, the so-called dog pit, who spend their days hunting for excuses to deny coverage, are chained to a spinning carousel. Every time it stops, one of them faces a shotgun. William can save that person, but only by pressing 2 buttons that drive spikes through his hands. He can do this twice. That's it. 2 people live, 4 die, and the carousel keeps turning until every shell is fired. It's brutal, but it's also the perfect metaphor for William's entire career. His job was to build formulas that decided who deserved treatment. People became numbers, probabilities, liabilities on a balance sheet. Now that same logic is made literal. A carousel that keeps moving no matter how much anyone screams. The mechanism doesn't care, it's just waiting for input, executing its code, reducing human lives to moving parts. The 6 employees, they're the middle managers of the system, not the villains at the top, but the ones who keep the gears greased. Every plea they make, I have kids, I'm young, I'm valuable, it's exactly what desperate clients once told them. And now their own words bounce back as the carousel turns. When William saves someone, the blood spurts from his hand, and the metaphor finally bleeds into reality. Jigsaw's tape even says it outright. 2 can live, 4 will die. Your decisions symbolize the blood on your hands. It's no longer an idea. The moral cost of his choices is physical now. Every act of compassion hurts. And that's the real inversion here. In business, empathy costs nothing. In Jigsaw's world, it costs flesh. And that you can live limit, that's these same fake scarcity insurance companies use to justify letting people die. Jigsaw just made the subtext text. By the end of it, William's entire worldview collapses. He's forced to play God under his own rules and finally sees that the system he served wasn't neutral. It was violence in a suit. When he's standing there, hands pierced and co-workers dead around him, is almost like a religious imagery, like a corporate Christ, holes in his palms, realizing too late that his gospel of fairness was always just cruelty dressed up as logic. But it's pretty crazy that somehow this movie manages to humanize William. He sees the damage, he feels it, He understands it. And you know that if he manages to leave the game alive, he won't make the same mistakes again. But the thing is, if he is not willing to make them, someone else is. That's how the system works. So a traumatized William leaves the shotgun carousel room and limps to the next trap. The acid room is where everything comes together. This is the culmination of every trap before it and the final act of William's unraveling. Up until now, William's tests have all forced him to experience his own cost-benefit logic from his side, to know the consequences of being the evaluator. But the last room flips that dynamic completely. For the first time, William isn't the one making the decisions. The power goes to Tara and Brent, the widow and son of Harold Abbott, the guy from the earlier scene, the one William refused coverage to because of a cyst surgery he had 30 years ago. That's when it all clicks. This isn't random revenge, it's deeply personal. The same family who lost someone because of his policy now gets to decide whether he lives or dies. That's the poetic symmetry of Saw 6. The man who used to play God is now at the mercy of the people he condemned. The moral math William used to hide behind has turned against him. And this moment connects back to John Kramer's line from earlier: you think it's the living that will have the ultimate judgment over you, because the dead will have no claim over your soul. But you may be mistaken, because it's Harold's death that will determine William's life. And then, of course, there is the acid itself, hydrofluoric acid, a perfect metaphor. It dissolves from within, silently, invisibly, irreversibly, which contradicts William's reaction to it because it's not supposed to hurt and he screams like hell, but I digress. Just like the kind of cruelty that hides inside bureaucratic systems, William's body becomes a symbol of the structure he built. Pristine on the outside, respectable, well-dressed, professional, but underneath is dissolving, morally, ethically, spiritually. His death is grotesque and poetic at the same time. The man who once allowed people to rot from the inside by denying them treatment now literally suffers the same fate. And notice how the acid system is automated and detached, like a machine following input-output logic. Once Brent pulls the lever, the mechanism executes without emotion, mirroring the cold logic of a corporate formula. This is capitalism as body horror, a system that functions precisely by erasing empathy. Then there's Tara and Brent themselves. They're not just characters, they're symbols of generational trauma. Tara's hesitation to kill William comes from exhaustion. She's felt the system's cruelty for so long that she can bring herself to repeat it, even when it would be justified. Brent, on the other hand, is pure inherited rage, the younger generation taking justice into their own hands, but by doing so becoming what they hate. In that moment, you see how vengeance becomes cyclical. The jigsaw test doesn't end the system, it replicates it. It teaches victims how to think like their oppressors. Meanwhile, Pamela Jenkins, who's William's sister by the way, reveal time, represents the media's role in sensationalizing suffering, just as she sensationalized Jigsaw's ideology for ratings. Her position behind the cage, trapped in her own separate box, turns her into both a stand-in for the viewer and a symbol of moral passivity. She doesn't act, she observes, horrified. She's our reflection, the passive observer, horrified but complicit. And when it's over, William's formula finally collapses. His algorithm was designed to predict who had the best chance to survive, but here, that logic doesn't matter. He's not judged by risk, by numbers, or by data. He's judged by feeling, by loss, by someone finally bringing human emotion back into the system. The acid room isn't just punishment, it's revelation. It's what happens when the cold rationality of profit finally meets the heat of human consequence. What makes Saw 6 so haunting isn't just its brutality, it's how easy it was to predict. William Easton is not a supervillain, he's a middle manager in a system designed to turn life and death into spreadsheets. When the movie came out in 2009, there was a lot of talk about it being too political, but it wasn't making any crazy claims, it was just simply describing reality. The idea that someone could die because of a denied insurance claim wasn't fiction, it was statistics. The system rewarded those who denied coverage, who analyzed risk, who saved money by letting people die quietly, and it still does. So when nearly 2 decades later, an insurance CEO named Brian Thompson was shot and killed by a man people claimed to be Luigi Mangione, a man who believed his own suffering had been ignored by that same machinery, it didn't feel like coincidence, it felt inevitable. Saw 6 didn't just predict a crime, it exposed the emotional math that makes that kind of violence possible. Jigsaw's world wasn't a fantasy, it was America's healthcare system wearing a mask. And that's why the movie feels prophetic, because the carousel never really stopped turning.